To this event organized by Iitmaana, the IIT Madras Alumni Association, the Bay Area chapter. Nice to see all of you here. I think we're going to have a very interesting evening. First off, I'd like to thank Silicon Valley Bank and Inventus Law for being part of this event. They are going to, make this evening really good for all of us. Let me start by introducing John Lee from Silicon Valley Bank.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. We're so happy to host you here at our offices and looking forward to a great discussion tonight. Really, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes and just share with you a little bit about Silicon Valley Bank and what we do so that you are more familiar with us. And I do want to point out my teammate, Priya Rajan, who is our market lead for India. Hopefully you'll get a chance, if you haven't already, to meet her tonight. And I know she's looking forward to connecting with all of you and seeing how we can be of help to you in your business. So just real quick about Silicon Valley Bank and what we do. So we've been around for 35 years, and I would say what makes us unique is that we really focus on the innovation ecosystem. So we bank sectors like technology, software and hardware, life sciences, including biotech and med device and diagnostics, digital health, those areas. What we call energy and resource innovation, that means clean tech, solar, biofuels, ag tech, those types of areas, as well as the venture capital and private equity firms that invest in these companies. We are actually the market leader in terms of banking venture-backed tech companies. We work with a majority of them. Also a majority of the companies that have gone IPO over the last couple of years, as well as a majority of the venture capital firms in the U.S. We work with companies across all stages, whether they're brand new startups, venture-backed, or publicly traded companies. And what do? Well, we're a full-service commercial bank, so it's everything from your basic checking account to debt financing, which includes venture debt, working capital, mezzanine debt, buyout financing. We also provide cash management and investment services. As you go global, we provide services like foreign exchange and trade finance. We also have our private bank and wealth management team. So for general partners of venture capital firms as well as C-level executives of tech companies, we can provide private banking services to those individuals. And given the fact that we work with so many tech companies and VCs, we're able to get a lot of insights from them in terms of what's happening as far as startup trends, market growth rates, and what's happening in terms of fundraising. So we're able to package all that information and publish research. That includes what's the state of markets, what's the startup outlook. If you go to our website, you'll be able to see some of our research reports that we put together. In terms of the size of the bank, we're over 50 billion in assets, 130 billion in terms of funds under management, and over 25 billion in terms of our loan portfolio. And we actually are global in scope. So we have about 30 offices across the U.S. Internationally, we currently have offices in the UK, Ireland, a new office in Germany, Israel, and 4 offices now in China, and we're setting up a new office in Canada. And Priya and I were part of our Global Gateway team. So our Global Gateway team, we cover emerging markets around the world. So that includes India, where Priya and I focus our efforts. Also Latin America, countries like Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. The Middle East, countries like Turkey and UAE. Also Australia and New Zealand. And we work with a lot of companies that are based out in Russia as well. So that gives you a sense of kind of the size and scope of the bank. So that's really, what I had to share about the SVB. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us, and we're happy to follow up with you. Got our contact information here, and we're more than happy to share these slides with you as a reference. Okay. So that's it about us. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Anil, and I know he's got some slides here to walk through. So. Once again, thanks John and Priya and SVB. Could we have a quick round of applause? I know it's evening, but appreciate all the hospitality, even though some badges were missing. Yeah, so we are Inventus Law. We call ourselves the Global Technology Law Firm. We actually have a trademark for it, so nobody else in the world can call themselves that. So these are trademark over here and smiling. What that means is we basically do one thing. We work with technology companies, and that's all we do. But we work with technology companies across the world and from start to finish. So we are a full service firm. We're based in Palo Alto, but have offices in India now, and affiliations and other lawyers and network of other service providers, advisors, literally across the world. We have, I'd say, clients from 38 countries, different countries that we work with in different forms. So that's sort of I've personally worked with over 3,000 startups, founders over the last 20 years in Silicon Valley. Our numbers are not really as close to SVB. These are the guys with the money, but our clients have raised over $4-5 billion again in the last 20 years. So we've done well. As I said, I call myself a startup lawyer, so that's all I do. Help startup founders navigate through the challenges of starting companies from a legal perspective. And that includes using our experience to negotiate with investors, or when you're hiring advisors, to sort of use our experience to explain sort of how equity should be distributed, how to protect yourself, your intellectual property, all of the good stuff that if you don't do well, somebody else will read about you in this. So our job is to keep you away from there. And then obviously, it's in Silicon Valley, companies have been formed, grown and done well, and there's a process set up. So it's very easy to do right. There's no real magic, unfortunately, that I can say I have necessarily on the legal side. The magic really is to do it properly, making sure it's done properly, and the decisions and the documentation, numbers and structures make sense and pass the muster in terms of being a successful startup. So you should sound like, walk, smell, like any other Apple, Google, Facebook, whichever company you want to be, at least from a legal perspective. The product is what you want to be creative about, not your necessarily legal terms and processes. So I have a short presentation, and what we'll do, we have around 60 minutes. I'll make a presentation on the General Corporate Framework, from starting to raising money, hiring, IP protection. And I have my colleague Richard Peters, who is I call him an ace patent lawyer. He's really one of the best patent lawyers I've worked with. He's going to make a presentation on patents, and it's again, his legal work is much better than the presentation, although the presentation is also, he'll try to make it interesting as we said before. And it's all legal, so you can imagine it's a lot of good material, so please pay attention. And then followed by that, last but not the least, we should be talking about, again, protecting your trademarks, your intellectual property, working with customers. So Shruti is part of our commercial practice. They help in basically anything outside, with third parties, license agreements, partnership agreements, your terms of use, privacy policies, and also your increasingly, if you're selling or have any customers in Europe, your GDPR compliant companies. So Shruti will talk about all of that good stuff. And then I think we'll have time at the end for Q&A, but I like to keep it more interactive. It's evening time, so I'm eating some hot Indian food, so I don't want to risk you guys sleeping when you sleep. So please feel free to ask questions
as we go along, right? It's just more fun. If you have any examples of from your experiences that you want to share, feel free to do that. If you want to challenge me with something that I believe I said is wrong, I'd love to take you on. With that, I'll just start with a very simple slide. And by the way, you have these slides, so Naren can share the slide. You don't have to show pictures or any of that. As much as I'd like to do that. It's $1 a slide, so that's it. So this is the slide. As I said, it's sort of based on my experience. I just want to keep it very simple. When you start, how do you start? You typically incorporate a company. You raise your small series angel round. When I started practicing 20 years ago, it was, I would say, angel round of 50,000, literally. And now we're looking at angel rounds of 500,000. So numbers have changed in the last 20 years, but nothing else has changed. Right? The process, the structure, how you set companies up, how you walk them through the life cycle of being a startup, most of it has remained the same, right? So, as I said, the numbers have gone up. You add more zeros because of where the market is, but if you keep this in mind, this is the sort of timeline that you will walk through from start to finish in most cases. And obviously there are some variations. Some companies get sold much earlier or much higher. Or some companies raise a lot more money without having customers. But this is sort of the standardized version of a typical startup right now. So you would start a company, raise some angel round that will allow you to get some basic customers, get a couple of customers to sign up. LOI, do a prototype, start working, maybe get some small revenues. That will excite a Series A institutional investor to put in, again, it used to be about $500,000 to $1 million, but now $5 to $10 million as part of your Series A. And that's where things get interesting. That's where you hire the full team and try to get the CTO of Google to join you. And because you are now a venture-backed company. Once you've done that, you start shooting for the stars, you start selling to enterprise. Obviously, as many of you probably know, it's not easy to sell to enterprise. So you need a well-funded corporation, you need a strong team, you need technology that works, doesn't go down at all. The requirements are very the expectations are much higher. So if you've done all of that well, then you'll raise your Series B, and then you keep raising more money. It's part of being a startup founder, and you're always raising money. And then if you're successful, then somewhere between having raised in this market $20 to $50 million, you'll end up with an exit from Series C somewhere to Series D, either going public or selling. And in this market, again, going public is a very small number of companies are going public. You'll very likely end up selling to a large acquirer in things. One thing to keep in mind, and then we get to the cap table, is when you sell, when you read newspapers about companies that have sold for $100 million, it's not easy to tell how much the founders made in that business, right? Or whether they made any money. And the reason is whether founders make money or how much they make is all captured in a simple thing called your cap table. So to back up, many times I'm asked the question, why do I need a lawyer? And the reason you need a lawyer is because lawyers like myself, experienced people who've done this before, have seen companies go from start to finish. We can sort of help you draw the line from where you are to an exit and get a sense of, at least based on some assumptions, what the outcome will be for you personally as founders, based on those assumptions and exits. So you don't just jump in the dark and say, okay, I'm going to start a company and take a shot. You have a good sense of the numbers where they need to be for A round, B round, C round, so that you know, at least have a rough idea of how much money you could potentially make upon a certain exit with some assumption.
When in this process should we start thinking about board of directors?
So legally you're required to have a board from day one, as soon as you incorporate. You will, as your institutional investors come in, they will require, in most cases they will require to be on the board as well. And as part of that process, you have to think about what it means to have an outside third party on your board, right? In most cases, and again, that's why you need good counsel at your Series A level to advise you, you being the company, but also you personally, in terms of what are the implications. Many times investors, even if they don't have, they have minority ownership, they may have 20-30% at the Series A level, they will still get rights that could affect the business operations, sometimes your own personal interest in the company. Because also keep in mind, and we'll talk about this as soon as I get to the next slide, your stock will be subject to vesting in most cases. So you will not have 100% of your stock loaded, whereas investors that come in, even though they get 20-30%, that's all fully vested. So the dynamics are not the same as they may appear. But yes, I mean, you have to have, legally you're required to have a board, but it can be a single individual. You as a founder could be the sole board member.
But it doesn't have to be a full-blown board.
One-person board is a full-blown board.
Okay, but, okay.
Under Delaware law, that's what it is.
And that really takes place between formation and aging.
At the time of formation, you need someone, one individual to be on the board. And it can be you, but that's all it's sufficient. Any other questions? So this is the most attractive slide in the presentation, so look at it and ask questions, otherwise after this it gets closed down from the...
Can the company be formed as a sole proprietorship? It has to be LLC. What is the model over there?
If you're looking to raise venture money or build a typical startup, it should be a C corporation. And preferably a Delaware C corporation.
How much time and effort there is to register?
The registration is half a day, 2 hours of job, and $350. You can go online and register it. It's very straightforward. And frankly, we don't even charge for that. It's really very simple to register. The key is when you go online and register, either Zoom or one of these services, if you use them, you pay the $300-400 for their services and plus the filing. Right? You can do it without even charging you for that. Plus, if you go to a third party, you end up with a structure that may or may not be a typical startup structure. So many times you actually have to shut down or redo or refile the certificate. So you have to get another $300-400. To be sure, I'm not selling a service to earn $300 from you and completely legal. I'm just saying how it works. Okay?
No, just a request to repeat the question because I don't think it's audible to everybody.
Good point. Okay, so I will go on to the next slide for this. So again, this is what the standard, the gold standard as I call it is. It doesn't have to be, there's no legal requirement, but it helps simplify things. It also puts perspective on the founders on how to structure their equity initially and how some of that plays out. So typically in a Delaware C corporation or a typical startup company, you would start with the 10 million authorized shares. And my test is if you go to a lawyer and they say something other than Delaware C Corp or other than 10 million common stock, you walk away. And you certainly don't use a CPA to incorporate it. As much as I respect CPAs, I would say don't do that. It's very easy to structure and incorporate these companies with these numbers, but if you don't do it right, you're just wasting time and money. So keep it very simple. This is how Google, Facebook, Apple, all these big companies are for. It's work for you, work for them, it should work for you. So that's not where you want to create it. So you have 10 million shares of common stock, and out of that you issue 80-90% to 8-9 million to the founders at a very low price. When you're setting up the company, IRS has blessed this structure where it doesn't matter what the value of the company is because of the IPO coming in. Because the company is valued at, the IRS agrees and it's accepted the presumption that the value of the shares you're getting is equal to the value of the assets you're contributing to the company. But you get one good shot at it. You can't repeatedly do it. So it's very important to again do a proper assignment of all the IP that you're bringing into the company in exchange for all the equity, 90% of the initial equity that you get. And then you would reserve, if you have a plan to hire, which you most likely will, you reserve a 10-20%, 1 to 2 million in option pool, depending on your hiring, you will be higher, it will be lower. But that's a sort of an average structure for your initial equity. And again, this will change over time. And keep in mind, as investors come in, they will get preferred stock, and those are new shares that will be added. This just sets the baseline on which you're starting off. And then let's say if you get investors investing 5 million at 10 million valuation, they get 50%, that means there'll be another 10 million shares issued, and your 90% will suddenly go down to 45%. Simple math. Any questions? I also took the liberty, I've again, I spent some time thinking through the presentation. I've been doing this for now 10 years since I started my firm. I've been doing marketing. And so one of the things that I got asked a lot, and I use that in my knowledge and all the information we get to draw this as an initial sort of roadmap. Again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's just meant to be a roadmap on how the equity should be allocated. It just helps in thinking through if you're hiring someone initially, for example, if it's a founder that's also going to be full-time and had the initial idea and raise the customers and the investor, that's the top founder gets 45%. Now, if that founder is not full-time or not getting the initial customer, founder 2 is getting it, then you would move that 5% to the other category. So when you sit down as founders to allocate equity, this will help you sort of sort out which bucket, where the number comes. Again, a rough map, right? Don't fight with your co-founder because I said this. So you have to come to an agreement based on what works. I think the most critical part in all this is have a clear agreement and a written agreement between the initial founders so that there's no disagreement in the future. That, I can tell you again based on my experience, the number one problem, issues in legal and which relates to even the ability to scale or even raise money, is where co-founders or initial employees and founders have a disagreement on the equity. And if you have that, if you have a founder or co-founder or a former employee that was working for you, file a claim or even make a claim, nobody's going to invest in your company. At that point, you're toxic. So it's as sometimes as simple as not having a written agreement can tank the company many times. And having vesting so that understanding what vesting is, how it works, because if you are two founders and you decide to divvy up 50%, the next day your co-founder will say, maybe, Naren, I'm happy with my life, I've got this great offer from Google, see you. Now that guy walks away with 50% equity and you have to now take the company forward. And you're stuck with it because you've also assigned all the IP, all the great ideas, everything you built in the product into the company, which he also owns 50%. So be very careful. And I also created this phrase, I should trademark it, that it should be fair. Fair doesn't mean equal. Right? So if there are 2 of you, or 3 of you, or 4 of you, don't assume, no 2 human beings come to this world, right? It's my philosophy. Come to this world with the same amount of knowledge, enterprise, value, contribution. Right? So be fair to each other, sit down. Most importantly, get an agreement, put it in writing, and then move forward. And by the way, if you're not able to reach agreement, that's a great sign. That's a good time to walk away. Instead of spending 6 months building a product, going out to investors, and then having a disagreement. Because that obviously will be bad. One extreme example I give, one extreme example I give is a company I work with. I was at the startup. I used to work at Cooley Godward and then went into a startup that was my client and then went back into the audit and private practice. But in the interim when I was at a startup, I was also helping a couple of founders I met at an event and they became my friends, so I was helping them. We set up the company, everything was set up exactly like this. And it was a semiconductor company, so this was a long time ago. They came to me and said, Anil, good news, we were sitting in Starbucks, and they said, good news, we got a term sheet from a VC on Sandal, $5 million, this was 2004, so it was a lot of money, Series A. But again, those chip companies who needed that money. And they said, let's call Ashish. I'm like, okay, who is Ashish? They call Ashish and make an offer, so, hey Ashish, you have to move back from Arizona, we have an investor and now we're ready to go. And Ashish was quite on the other end. It turns out Ashish was the 3rd co-founder who was sitting in Arizona. The 2 founders just assumed that when they get funded, Ashish would move to Silicon Valley. Ashish obviously turns out also had a mortgage and home and kids in Arizona. So that led to a disagreement. Simple things like these that the founders had never talked about, got flushed out, and the investor was looking into this, right? The investor had given a term sheet, usually get 24 hours to respond to the term sheet. And instead of having to do that, founders were now struggling to figure out what to do with Ashish. So it ended up being a good situation. We found a way to get him out and give him some equity, and the investor agreed on the distribution, so we were able to move forward. But that could frankly have been the end of that company, because the investor would not have funded if a third founder was not in agreement with either giving up the equity. So they had also agreed that it would be 1/3, 1/3. So that's sort of as extreme of an example. So don't do that to yourself. Right? Have it in writing. The other thing I say is good fences make good neighbors. So as long as you have good fences, and lines are drawn, everyone's in agreement, you just move forward. You have to move forward.
The question is on the column titled full-time. So if I have a co-founder who is not yet full-time, when that co-founder comes on as full-time, let's say that's the increment in the equity they get.
Right. Or you can, yes, I mean, you can do one of two things. You can either say that you'll get your extra 5%, you deserve it, and issue it later. But if it's going to be full-time after funding, then keep in mind the price of that stock will go up. So it could bring him, he will have to pay higher price for the 5%. What you could also do is say, the company will issue you that 5%, but that 5% will start vesting only after you. So he can pay and get the low price, but doesn't start vesting and you get control. As long as you have majority of the ownership, you have the control to terminate him, and then that 5% will never. If he doesn't go come full time, let's say by whatever date you choose for your payout, you can terminate him and invest in the stock.
So there are three founders. Should each of them have their own lawyers, or?
Oh boy, no. So typically, did I give you my point?
As long as they work at the
Typically, you
same
would
firm.
hire one lawyer to represent the company at the start.
Okay.
So we don't represent the founders. But as part of that, we would sit down with you, counsel you, make sure that my job is not to make decisions for you. My job is to give you the information, the pros, cons, based on my experience, and let you guys make a decision. But make sure that you make the decision, it's done in writing, done properly, you guys agree on it before you move forward. But you don't need it, because there's nothing magical here. It's not like, either you guys will agree, after you get the information, understand the pros, cons, what the options are, you guys will either agree, in which case we'll document all of that on behalf of the company, protect the company more than anything else, or you'll not agree, in which case we'll move on. The other reason you want to, similar to what the protecting yourselves from founders, the founder protecting yourselves from each other. Also, typically you would have a bunch of people working for you. If you go to a Thai event, some uncle will come and I used to say uncle 10 years ago, but I'm now old enough, I should not say that. But some Thai angel will come and say, by the way, I have great experience, I can help you, and start giving you ideas. And then by the time you come to me and we start forming the company, this Thai angel or this XYZ angel will come and say, wait a minute, break my 5%. So you have to protect yourself. And being in that situation is, you don't want to be in that position, because now you have to deal with someone who could be influential in the community, who may have done some work with no agreement, from your side no expectation, you thought it was just honorary work, but his expectation was he's going to get 5%. So before you have anyone do any work for you, make sure there's not just the founder, but there's an agreement with that individual on the equity, the vesting, what they have to do to earn it. What happens if it doesn't work out, right? If they start working with you, they're developing the product, but you realize that their skill sets don't match what you're looking for, how do you extricate yourself, right? All of that should be in written agreement. And also assignment in writing of all the IP that they develop, right? So that there's never an issue that whatever work they did, and especially if you're copying that into your product, that's owned by the company. It should always be owned by the company. And if whether or not they work out, they walk away with whatever IP they will have earned by them in the agreement. But there should be never a claim on the IP that they will never work out. Uber issue was a big issue. It keeps going back and forth. It's really basically if you have a bunch of contractors working for you, they could be, under California is very tight, and they come up California labor, depending on who the governor is, usually the liberal Democrat, so they always pro labor. California Labor Commission keeps taking actions where if you have someone working for you and they're working 40 hours a week, even though you might say it's a contractor, they would claim that it's not a contractor, it's an employee, and you have to pay them full wages. Plus, if they're more than 40 hours, overtime. And this is the one area where you could be personally liable. So So in most cases, almost all cases, jurisprudence, has said if you start a private limited or a C corporation, your liability is limited to the value of your shares. So nobody can, you cannot be personally liable. This is one area where California court could hold you personally liable if you haven't paid wages to individuals that were deemed as employees.
If I want to hire, say, a design engineer, and I go to a company and hire a design engineer, and he works, let's say, 60 hours a week for 6 weeks.
Right.
I don't have to worry about this.
As long as you have a contract with the company, not an individual. Right? And you're paying for whatever under the contract.
Service.
Now keep in mind, that's, in most cases, yes, right? But if that individual is working in your office, is coming 9 to 5 under your direction, that individual could still take a position that is an employee. So it's a facts and sort of, case in fact basis. So you want to be very careful about that. Right? For example, if he's coming into your office wearing your uniform, or he has a business card with your logo on it, and he's representing himself, and you're allowing him to represent himself as an employee, as an officer of the company, right? You have to be, could be a strong risk that could be treated as an employee.
Is there a length of time where that person's working for you that makes a difference?
It doesn't, it's just the nature of the services, the amount of supervision, control. If they have multiple jobs, for example, it's a better analysis that they're concerned with not an employee. It's not necessarily a length of time.
I guess
So it could be a factor in your defense, but it's not determined.
Because if I use a contractor for, say, a 2 or 3 week period when they work intensely for me, would they then say, oh, you're an employee?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. So if it's a short-term contract and it's clearly, but they do this for a living for different people, then yes, that's a good analysis that it was meant for a small project, not a long-term, and this is what this individual does for the company. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
What do you mean by filing trademarks and patents? They can be both defensive and offensive value.
Yeah, I'll let our patent and trademark lawyers talk about it, but the question, the short answer is that when you file your trademarks and patents, it gives you the right to both, protect yourself from third-party claims, right? No third-party can claim that you're violating or being infringing their trademark or patent. It also allows you and gives you the right to shut down a third party or claim damages from a third party. So once you've done that on the timeline, if you remember, there's seed financing, and again the instrument, the structures have remained the same, the numbers have changed, the different forms. You either raise money from your friend, family, if you can prove your uncles who put some money into your company. That'll be a simple one-page round, very quick to do. And I would always recommend before you have a prototype, looking for the $500,000 that you need to pay developers, or 100,000, whatever it is, to develop the prototype. Getting it from someone, your ex-boss, someone that knows you well, is the easiest way to do it. There are now obviously a bunch of incubators. Y Combinator is the most premium. You can get in. For early stage founders, it also provides a network and a lot of experienced people around to mentor you. YC's come up with, 5-6 years ago, they just did a new version of it. It was called a simple agreement for equity, future equity. These are all instruments, simple instruments to get your initial 100,000 to 500,000 seed round in very quickly, and without having to value the company, without having to go to the difficult decision or discussion of an investor on what the value of the company is. Basically, in all of these, most of these cases, all you're saying is that we are taking the money today, but we are funding the valuation to future when institutional investors come in. The companies also develop the product and the business. Institutional investors come in who are more professional in valuing companies. And Mr. Fred, if you're putting money today, you will get the same terms, same valuation. But because you're coming in early, you get some sort of discount. So it's a sort of a good balance of getting the money in, but also rewarding them for the risk they take today versus having to wait until you're an institutional investor.
Can you talk about warrants and debentures and so on?
Yeah, so I would not recommend warrants and debentures. Well, so I would not, warrants are good for advisors, but not for fundraisers. Warrants again is a right to buy shares in the future.
Right.
But you, as a company, you don't want to be selling warrants, right? They're meant to reward advisors or consultants, developers as equity or inequity for what they're doing. So again, with the right to invest. But in most cases, you want to use options or initially stock to reward.
How about notes with the cap?
So I say that
We
again.
talked about discount, but not the cap that is associated with
Yeah, so I guess the question was discount and cap. So yes, so I'm just scrambling through this because we have a lot of other slides. But yeah, so the terms could be different. Cap basically means that if you're investing today, let's say it's a $10 million cap. If your Series A is at 20 million valuation, if you're investing 500,000 today, you are still promised or committed, the company is committing that you will still get 5% of the company. Because your cap for the Series A, you get Series A shares, but at a valuation of 10 million, not 20 million. Because you're coming in early, you should have to, your money should not work against you, right? The money is being used to increase value, but with the increased value, right, now you have to get shares at a higher value. So that's a protection for early investors. Make sense? And then venture financing, so again, I will make sure I have enough time for our time to get on time presentation. When you start negotiating a term sheet with VCs, these are don't just focus on the price, that's the one takeaway. Just don't focus on the price and the valuation, how much money you're raising at what valuation. There's a bunch of things, especially management and control, as was asked earlier about board. You have to understand what you're signing up for, right? You don't want to be in a position where you give up a high-paying job at Google, start a company, and then it turns out because the way you negotiated the terms, you end up working for that company because you have no control. You may have some stock, but all the decision-making, all of that is now going back to the business. So be careful about it. It happens more often than you like to think, especially if you're not represented in our council. So those are the areas you have to think about. Management control is the key. Under Delaware law, shareholders are the owners of the company. So shareholders get to choose and elect and fire board members. And board members get to choose, elect, and fire officers, executive officers. So you will also be the CEO, CFO, CEO, executive officers. And your stock will be subject to vesting. So if you don't have the decision on hiring and firing executive officers, then you also lose control on who will hire or who will fire you, and therefore also affect your vesting of the shares. So again, it's okay initially when you're just co-founders, but as your investors come in, it's very critical to understand who can hire, fire board members, how the board members can make decisions that could affect your role as an executive officer, and how that affects your ownership of the shares. So again, I get asked a lot of times, how do you value a company? I'll just put some bullet points there, pretty self-explanatory. You can go through those. Venture financing is a pretty intense process. It takes almost 2 to 3 months and significant back and forth with investors. So again, you want to be sure you're properly represented. The investors on Sandal Road, they've been doing it for hundreds of years. Like they come and well prepared, they know what they're doing. They're good counsel, they understand the terms. It would be foolish for you to walk in with your Google.com knowledge and try to negotiate, right? So have good counsel and know that this is the platform on which you're really building your company. Especially your personal relationship with the company, ownership, and your personal outcome will depend on the terms of that investment in most cases. These are the terms, again, I don't need to go into details. A lot of it is legalese, and hopefully when you get a term sheet, you call us and we can go through this, and I can answer questions offline, but these are the terms are probably the most important ones on a typical term sheet that you would want to look at. A question was asked on email earlier, so I'll just take another 30 seconds. If you've also got a India development center, then you want to create or get to a point where, especially if you have founders or co-founders sitting in India, you want to get to a structure where you have a Delaware Corp, which is the parent company, which owns 100% of the India company, and your stock is still in the US company, your option pool is set up in the US company, your investors will come into the US company. The US company will then in turn possibly own 100% of the India company and service agreement, so that all the work done in India is assigned to the India company for the employees, including the founders of India. And all of that work will be then upstream assigned to the US company, so that the US C Corp owns all the IP. That's the sort of goal you want. That's where you want to be. Like the US company owns the IP, it can raise money, work with customers. With the India company as a service center, so all the development done in India is assigned to and owned by the US. So So with that, I'll have Richard Peters come in and talk about patent.
Thanks a lot, now. I'll be kind of fast, just a couple of slides. So the key to patents is, this first point is that it's basically, it's a tension between two opposing ideas. First, it's a race to the patent office. So first to file is whoever gets the patent, right? So when you file a patent application, it goes to a patent examiner. The patent examiner does a search, and if they determine that you're the true inventor, then you get the monopoly right for the invention that you filed with the patent office, the claim to the patent application. At the same time, it's you need to file something that's sufficiently technically accurate and you need a sufficient disclosure, right? So there's some tension there from the perspective of startups because quite often you have some set of innovations, and that's what's motivating you to begin the startup. But you haven't yet parsed out to see what's a true invention, what's not an invention, maybe what's overlapping with prior technology, etc. So just acknowledging that tension is and determining the question of what the inventions are. This is something that is pretty common in most startups. Very rarely do I have a client come to me and say, hey, I have one invention, it's discrete and unitary, let's file a patent application on it. I think we know exactly what we've invented and what it means. Another issue with startups is that inventions continue to evolve and update after you file the application. So very rarely does someone, and it's usually maybe in the electrical engineering field or the chip field, where they've completed a design and now they're off and running with the company. Usually, they're improving and they're going through iterations of the invention. So how long do you wait until you file the patent application at what point do we file? Because once you file a utility patent application, and I'll get into what a utility provision was in a second, you're stuck in the four corners of what you filed. You can't update the utility application. The only way you can do that is file a new application. So that can be expensive and have some issues. And that kind of leads into another issue is cost. How many applications to file, how many inventions you have, etc. And then finally, it's not really related to these tensions, but it comes up quite a bit, is that you have a backend in India, or you have a partner in India, and you guys are co-inventors. So if you have invention outside the United States, because in fact, I would think every country requires that if you're in that country and you invent something, you need to get a foreign filing permission from that country to go to another country to file. So, like Daniel said, what you want to do is you're trying to pool your assets in the United States. So if you have an Indian vendor and you want to file in the United States, it's actually, I think it's a misdemeanor crime to file in India without getting permission from the Indian patent office first. So these are just a few of the key points and challenges that arise with in a startup situation. And so I'll go to the next slide. And there's lots of different models and strategies that you can utilize in patent law. And then the next slide, I'll bring it right now, is this is one strategy that I found to be, it addresses those key tensions and challenges, and I found it to be very useful for startups. So has anybody here filed a patent application before? Yeah, so typically you work at a large company and you have an invention, so you fill out some type of paperwork, it goes up to in-house patent counsel, they approve it or just don't approve it, and then it comes back, and then you work with them, you file a utility patent application. There's a little bit of back and forth. They may bring in outside patent counsel to do that, etc. So that's a typical large entity type of model. This is a series of utility patent applications. And I'll just quickly say we define utility before I proceed. Utility patent application is a normal patent application. It has the claims, it has the description of the invention. It's what the patent examiner is actually going to look at. This model, what it does though, it begins with something else called a provisional patent application. And what a provisional patent application is, if I was actually made director of the USPTO, I would change the name of it. I would call it a timestamp dated number of the patent office. And so what it is it's it's a different, you're in a different kind of mode of thinking when it comes to the provisional patent application. What you're really doing is taking all your innovations and just truly just data dumping them with the patent office in a single unitary filing to get the earliest filing date possible. And so I made the possible inventions generic with A, B, C, D, etc. Right? So you don't necessarily have to define and parse out what each invention is. Data dump it in there, get the unitary filing dates, and then we can push a lot of those decisions of which, what the invention is, which ones to prioritize, et cetera, down the road. And that's what this model kind of shows. The time is from left to right here in this model, and the circular nodes in the tree are the utility applications. The limitation on the provisional patent application is you have to file the first utility application within 1 year. And then you incorporate the provisional patent application or reference into the utility patent application. And as long as you do that, let's say we filed it today, 11/15/2018. Okay, so the provisional gets that date, and all those inventions that you disclose in the provisional get that early first date. And then when you file the utility, even if you file it, say, in May of 2019, the USPTO effectively gives you that filing date of the provisional patent application. So it's almost like a time machine. And then once you file the first utility in series of parallel, depending on business intelligence, et cetera, you can file the rest of other inventions. But what's amazing about this provisional model is it allows you to file as late as 2023. And I've had clients who filed 5, 6, 7, 8 years later, but they still get the original filing date, 2018 date. And that's just positive patentability because the prior art, especially, if you guys have an exciting startup, other people are thinking about it too, there's 7 to 8 billion people on the planet, you're going to have intervening prior art that's showing up in there. But as long as you can show that it was in the original provisional application, it's not a problem. We bring that up and show it to the examiner. They give you that earlier date, and then you kind of swing back before all the prior art that's being cited. So this is just a really quick, down and dirty model of that I found to be very, a description of a model I found to be very useful for provisionals. One great thing about this model is that the cost is pretty light up front. You get to disclose a lot of inventions. And then later on, after you're funded, then we can file the other applications where the filing costs and legal fees for the patent application are fairly trivial. Where in the beginning, legal fees can be kind of onerous if you're just in your early stages. So I found this to be pretty useful. It also, somebody asked about defensive ideas with patents. What's nice about this is, if you file first, what you file at the patent office becomes prior art that the other patent examiners can use against your competitors. So by data dumping all your ideas early on, it's kind of like an octopus that sprays black ink into the water and escapes, right? So you're blocking the way for other people who might file these ideas after you, and you'll be prior art against them, which can be useful. So the patents that never show up to sue you because an examiner rejected someone else is kind of an unsuccessful. You can actually look it up later on as time passes and see all your applications and see all the times that your applications have been cited against other people. And it's kind of nice to see, like, Google being rejected based on your patent. So, yeah, so that's I made a video where I go deeper into this for about 10-15 minutes. So if you want to give me your card after your talk, I can send the video over. And I also have another video that I made where I go into a lot of detail about if you're inventing in India and you want to file in the U.S. and the legal we can take care of.
If you do the data dump, and the data that you dump is in conflict with somebody else who's dumped out there, who wins?
It's prioritized based on time. So whoever files first, the first file wins, second place is last place. Yeah, so which is why I like the unitary date. Because a counter model would be to file the utility applications distant sequence, but somebody's going to co-locate their data dump somewhere in your sequence, and so you might lose your IP.
What is the cost range? Because as a startup, you don't have so much money. We have to decide whether you have to put a patent or use it for development. So how much?
So what's nice? So what's nice about the provisional is it's a low cost in the beginning. And then it depends on which law firm you go to, etc. But I do kind of a lightweight, lower cost provisional, and then I make my money when you are filing utility applications later on.
But the provisional has like 1 year time limit, right?
1 year time limit, but you can get you don't get around it, but you just have to file the first utility within the first year. And then while this A is pending at the patent office, it can be the parent for all the other nodes. Yeah. So you just have to do one. Some clients do more than one. It really depends on your funding, what your investors want, those types of factors. But what's nice about that is we push those decisions into the future when you have more information. Yeah.
And I know legal paperwork is not a priority, but there's no point paying a developer a lot of money to develop something that you can't find a patent on.
So you have to make that decision.
Yeah. It's still also a business decision. And I can tell you from experience, I've never had an instance where a company or a founder hasn't put in the $2,000, $5,000 and not thought and thought that this wasn't good value. It may not appear right away. But every patent is increasing millions of dollars in the valuation as you negotiate with these people.
Yeah, I worked with some companies that have gone through exit, and you can get the sense that they're trying to increase their value because you see a lot of patents being filed. So I would use that as a data point to back up what you said. So people that succeed tend to start filing a lot of patents to get increased valuation.
What if your product depends on several patents, your own patent and somebody else's patent?
Yeah, that's a good question. So almost everybody, so that usually comes up when you go public or at the exit, and then there's research to be done to see if you're infringing someone else. And that's just on a case-by-case basis. And so you can do what's called landscape search or freedom to operate search, and then we keep those pretty secret. And another thing I'll just tell you is that if you find prior arts that you're worried about, never email it among yourselves or email it to the attorney, or just keep it like the mafia. Just pick up the phone and call every patent attorney would tell you this, just call me. Yeah, don't email it to me like, oh no, this prior destroys everything, it's gonna hurt infringing the patent. Just pick it up and call me. 9 times out of 10, it's just close, but it's not relevant. Yeah, there's no calls.
No problem.
Yeah.
I am all the idea.
You own all that.
And sorry, to further up that point, you could get a license from the third party. One way to do it is to go out to the third party, give them equity cash, get a license to the part that you need to live.
And some third parties don't care. It just really depends on who they are. Some will license to happily, some of them are just, they're not worried about it. Some of them are trolls and you get sued. And that happens. Unfortunately, because trolls get more desperate, they're kind of dipping lower into the food chain with their lawsuits. So, yeah. Any other questions?
What happened in the recent decision, I think it was last year, I think, the U.S. Patent Office made some decisions. How does it affect us at all?
So your patent law is, it's very stable, normally a very stable area of law, but we have had some recent decisions made interesting with patentable subject matter. And so there's been some battles in how do you define patentable subject matter in software? That's if you want to call me, I'll talk to you about that. It's a long conversation. Regardless of what you think about President Trump, his director of his patent office is super pro-inventor. Your patent law is very agnostic as to party lines. It really depends on the personality of the director, and he's great. And he's really rewriting the rules at the patent office to make it pro-software. Again, the previous director was the former director of Google's patent office. And what do you do when you get a great patent? You sue Google. So she was a little bit anti. It's done a 180, yes.
No, are you covered worldwide on this with this patent?
So there's no such thing as a worldwide patent, but there's treaties that allow you to file in other jurisdictions within certain time limits and maintain your priority dates. So the key, patent law is all about priority date, right? First to file. So if you file your provisional in the U.S. and you want to go to India and file a utility application, there's 2 treaties you can use to go to India. An Indian patent office will use your U.S. filing date as their priority date. And that's in that. I got a video about that. I can have this in. Yeah.
So I thought there was something about first to file, rather than provisional patent in the last few years. Did that change? The first to file was.
You're right. It's just that what happened was in the U.S. we used to be a little bit different than the rest of the world. It was a first to invent system. So if you could prove a date of invention, then that's the date the USPTO would give you as the priority date for your 11/15/2018. It would be whatever you could prove that you invented. Usually, proof of invention was the filing of the patent application, but every once in a while, I had clients who
Drawings.
yeah, they had drawings and they had emailed it to someone else, and they had some date that they could prove to the examiner. But that doesn't exist anymore. The U.S. we made ourselves standardized like the rest of the world, so now we're just first to file.
So first to file is first to file in the provisional patent or the real first pretty patent?
The first to file the provisional that
that's
sufficiently
the most.
describes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I like the provisional, because we can first to file A, B, C, and D, just boom, one application, lower costs, get all filed, and then you go back to being coding and all those other things, yeah. And then I'll pop my head up and bug you again any months and hey, I have to do it for utility.
Provisionals and that don't have to have the details for A, B, C, and D.
No, they do, yeah. So you have to sufficiently describe that from a technical perspective.
That, so another person can build it, correct?
Well, they might build it in, yeah, so there's a lot of uncertainty early on, leaps of faith in the patent process. So somebody else could also begin building it, but unfortunately for them, once you get a patent issued, then you have the monopoly right.
Right.
It's like if I was enclosing in my house and somebody moves in, well, once I become the real owner, then I can go kick them out.
But
Yeah.
provisional applications are not public, so that's
No,
very important.
yeah.
So nobody would know what you filed in provisional.
The USPTO keeps everything secret for a year and a half to give you a head start. So like really let you know.
So on that note, so if I just file for one of the ABCD, just one of them, go to the application, then I get unlimited time to file the rest.
Well, unlimited while it's pending at the patent office, yeah. But yeah, exactly. And so, but this has to be filed within the year deadline, and we incorporate the provision by reference into A. Yeah, so it's like the parent node.
But you should have the ABCD sufficiently described in the
In
original.
the provisional.
Yeah,
But would that be made public within 1.5 years, the ABCD in the provisional?
it'll be accessible. Yeah. Within 1.5, yeah, if you filed utility. If you filed provisional and you didn't make it public, it just dies, disappears. Yeah.
Can you refresh that if you're not ready in a year?
You can't refresh the provisional. There's a few things in patent law you can't fix by giving the patent office money, and that's one of them. Yeah. The patent office is a fee generator, it makes money. Like, unlike the rest of the government that loses money. So they love their fees. And the one thing a fee won't fix is if you miss that year date, which is the bane of my life because I've spent many a Sunday night up late filing something for the client who decided on Saturday. They needed to file the including time.
So how do you usually tell whether an idea is patentable or not?
That's a great question. And so you can do patent searches, right? But there's a balance there because there is that year-and-a-half black box. So if you invented something and you said, okay, do a search, I can't see in the past year and a half. Now, if you're in the railroad industry or something like that, then we can do a really great search and I can give you a lot more certainty about whether that's invented because that prior goes back a long time. But if you're in a extremely hot area now, you're probably pretty new, and so there's not most of your prior is going to be in that black box. Typically, what I recommend is to file the provisional first. You can do a quick. You guys are experts in the field. You know. I asked the client, what are the key differentiators between you and what everybody else is doing? If you give me a list of 5 to 10 things, then that, in my experience, then that's the best indicator that there's at least some invention there. And so, if that's the case, file the provisional. Wait like 8 to 10 months, then do a search. Because you have more of that black box exposed, so your search is a lot more useful. And then based on that information, you can decide which invention to go with. When you file the first invention, what A would be, the identity of A. Yeah, then you get a lot of law firms will try to sell you a search up front, but the searches are they're only useful to tell if there's something a one-to-one matching type of priority. But the examiners reject you for other reasons. You have to be it can't be an obvious design choice. So you have to have, there's a subjective range on the examiner's part of how far you have to be from the previous prior to be patentable. And so prior search doesn't give you that information.
Oh, wait a minute, I worked, well, both of us worked in mass storage, Sears Logic for years. They had an attorney, I think it was in Santa Ana, and he filed a patent for disk drives. correct me if I'm wrong, but well, he started at like 1.5 inch, and he said, called another patent for 2 inch, and then 2.5, 3.5, all the way up to 8 inch. Then anytime these dish rack guys, Western Digital or Seagate, went to build a 2.5 inch, they had to pay this guy millions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Is that still?
yeah, you're the owner, you have the monopoly right for that period of time.
Even though I have no intention of building it, I can just go crazy and keep paying you money and file patents.
Yeah, it happens.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And how long has he had the authority?
Well, I don't know when this was, but it's 20 years from the first filing date. Yeah, so.
So I think this for a switch to the trademark versus the last for more simplistic I think. And come on. And I think we're good in time because we've done the Q&A, so we don't need to resolve.
Yeah, okay, that's fine, that's all.
Alright, so you form the company, you have your product, your service, your platform, you're ready to go. So that's where you will encounter things like terms of service and terms of use and privacy policy and why. And the reason why is because law requires it. Terms of use pretty much is going to be your first contract and pretty much only contract with your customers. So it is important because it will protect you. And privacy policy because you could be in any one of the space from say a product that targets children to sending emails to just collecting data and using that data. So all of that has to be disclosed in your privacy policy. If you have customers in Europe more than 0, you will need to comply with the new GDPR law that was enacted, that came in force this May. And California is going to have its own version of a heightened privacy law, which is going to be effective January 1st, 2020. So those are a couple of things to keep in mind when you start putting your website, start offering your services, product dashboard, platform over the web. So again, the risks that you don't have these policies in place is going to be unchecked liability. We generally have a limitation of liability. Any agreement that you've ever signed, be it with Grubhub, DoorDash, Lyft, Uber, every agreement will have a little section towards the bottom of their terms of service that says limitation of liability. That means that whatever happens, you will not be able to recover more than $10, $100. There will be no class action lawsuits. So that is there for a reason, and that is something that you would want in your terms of service and terms of use. GDPR, I've already highlighted a little bit. The reason why it's important is just because of the fines. It's 20 million euros or 4% of total worldwide turnover, annual turnover. So just be very, very cognizant. The minute you decide to enter into European market, give yourself 3 months and then work from there. And then just having these policies are not enough. You will need to make sure that you're recording the acceptance, because that's how it becomes a binding contract. And it is a contract at the end of the day. So make sure you are forcing your users or your registrants to sort of scroll through and click through. Just having it on your website is not enough because it's not a binding agreement. Every time you modify your terms of use or privacy policy, give notice. Treat it as a contract that you would treat any other contract that you've you would come in touch with. So that's a little terms of. Okay. I think there was another slide. I've quickly gone through why these contracts are necessary. They're also necessary because of the access that you're granting based on whatever it is that you're selling or providing services. So if it is a SaaS-based platform service, you will make sure that it's not a license. You will never say it's a license. If you go to any of these platforms, again, like Lyft, Uber, Grubhub, DoorDash, you can see I'm hungry, is because they will, it is an access to a service, and you would stay away from terms like license, because license itself gets heightened heightened analysis from the bankruptcy laws. So you would want to keep away from that. And of course, data security. Opt-out and opt-in is important, and giving a cookie notice is also important. It is under the GDPR, and very soon it will be under the California laws as well. So commercial contracts, now jumping from terms of use, privacy policy, commercial contracts is also something that you would think about. What is your model? Is it a SaaS-based service, or is it a software license agreement that you're entering into? SaaS agreements generally are cloud-hosted, fairly easy to negotiate. Usually we tell our clients to make it into terms of service, so that again, you're not signing an individual contract with each and every customer. SaaS agreements usually come with service level agreements. Again, we try to make it as robust and say, put it online, don't have paper contracts. Software license agreements typically take longer. They are negotiated across, the two parties sit across their computers and just negotiate. Couple of things to watch out for a license agreement is, of course, you're granting a license, so bankruptcy laws attached. And the reason why I say it is, if it's a patent, then even if your company goes under bankruptcy, then you will have to keep on providing that product or that service. So it's very essential to discuss and negotiate contract license agreement with someone who knows how to do it. Also, usually you would have a software license agreement with, say, an escrow clause. So how to negotiate an escrow? Do you want to give your source code? When? What are the release conditions? So those are the things that you would also negotiate in a software license agreement. When you are negotiating or drafting an agreement, of course, it has to be a very simple agreement. We usually stress on it because you don't want it to be filled with legalese, because that leads to ambiguity. IP considerations are really important, not so much in SaaS, because again, you're providing an access and not a license, but in software license agreement, it comes down to who owns the IP, who owns the pre-existing IP, who is enhancing that IP, who owns the modifications, so on and so forth. And then resultant data is one of the things to consider in especially SaaS agreements, especially when you're collecting a lot of data, you're processing that data, deriving intelligence from that data. Who owns that data? Of course, as a company, you would want to own that resultant data. You would want to extract all the intelligence from it, but your customer may think differently. So resultant data is where we're seeing a lot of back and forth from. Other considerations while entering into commercial contracts is, of course, indemnification. What is the scope of indemnification that you want the other party to cover you? Is it going to be just defending you? Is it going to be holding you harmless or not liable? And what is the procedure? So it can get very hairy, and you would want somebody to walk you through it. Limitation of liability is something I talked about earlier. It's a must-have for a SaaS agreement, for a terms of service agreement, really important. And then, of course, warranties and representation, again, something that will cover you in case of, especially in SaaS, it helps because your customer is definitely going to come after you should something fall apart and it not perform. And the approach is hands-off, not a problem. So that's pretty much commercial contract wrap-up. Trademark. I'll switch gears very quickly. Trademark is, like I said, it's a word, symbol, slogan, or product packaging design that tells you who your company, tells your clients, your customers, who your company is. And the reason why it's important is because that's the first thing they will associate with you. It can be a word mark, it can be a symbol, it can be a slogan, it can be a sound mark. Usually our clients are dealing with word marks, and they're generally company names. And there is a difference between a trademark and a trade name. And even though the rights may bleed into each other, the reason why it's important to understand the difference is you may have a great company name, but you may not end up selling any product under that name. So that company name, the noun will never become the associated name that people will associate your company with. So it's very important to think about your trade name and your company name separately, and your trademark separately. But think of a name or think of branding early on, because sometimes it has happened, and we see it more often than not. You think that the name that you've come up with is unique, is great, nobody else has it, and lo and behold, you get a letter and somebody already has that name, and then it creates a problem. Selecting a mark is a major headache, and a lot of my clients struggle just because it is hard to, because dictionary has finite words, and not every could be a fanciful or an arbitrary word, or a fanciful, like Haagen-Dazs is an inventive word. They just put two things together and it sounds unique. Xerox is an inventive word. Escalator was an inventive trademark till the time it started getting used as a noun, and then it lost all its trademark right. So if you can get fanciful or inventive, that's great, but arbitrary marks are also great to think about. So for example, Apple for computers is great. Windows for an operating system is, again, doesn't tell what is the service or the goods that's provided. The test pretty much when you're deciding about a mark is an inferential leap. Think about a mark and think about somebody having to take a jump to get to that point. So those marks work really well. Generic marks generally don't work, and it's hard to get a generic mark registered unless and until you're using that mark in commerce. Now, I'll go back to a very generic mark we saw early on in the presentation, and it was the global technology law firm. Very generic, describes exactly what the product is. The reason why we got the trademark is because it's been in use for more than 9 years. So that is the key. So if you've been using a mark, if it has goodwill, people can associate that mark with a particular service, then you can get a registration on a generic mark. If not, go for arbitrary marks. Those are easier to get. But when you are selecting a mark and you're thinking about filing an application, I would recommend conducting a search. And the reason why is because in trademark office, like I said, there are a finite number of words in the English dictionary. And even though the mark may sound very unique to you, it may not be. So before you adopt a mark, and even before you adopt a company name, to run a search. Trademark website that is run by the USPTO is a public website. It has a search, or you can call us.
Excuse me.
Yes.
What would you call, like, say, AMD? What would that be called? Where would that fit on that?
So AMD is an acronym, and right now it would be more of an arbitrary or a fanciful mark, because but when it started, I'm forgetting what it's for.
Analog micro device.
Exactly. It is actually very descriptive, so it would fall under descriptiveness. But the reason why they got it is because they started using, again, if you start using the mark before you register, and you have 5 years of continuous usage, you can get a descriptive or a generic mark registered. For example, American Airlines. It describes what it is doing. Or carpet cleaning company. It cannot get more generic than that. So as long as, because ultimately trademark law rests on whether or not users can understand and actually pick you from the crowd. So that's pretty much it. And this is a brief timeline as to the trademark filing process. Something similar to patent, trademark is also first to file. So if you think of a mark, don't wait till the time you start using it. I know I've been saying use it, but use it. If you have a mark and you know you're going to use it within 4 years of filing the application, file that mark. Because once you file it, you get the priority in the trademark office. If there is a similar mark that is being used in common law, but they are after you, they can be stopped. They can still go to the court and stop you from getting your mark, but at least at the trademark office level, because they are very concentrated on who filed first, you will still be okay. So this is just, you file the application. application. The application is analyzed by an examiner, and based on their, if there are no problems with your application, your mark will go forward, and it is something called, it will be published in the register, giving third parties right to oppose. So that's why I said it's very important to do a search before you file, because you don't want to be stuck in an opposition. It's expensive and it is in the nature of litigation. If the mark is published and there's no opposition, depending on whether or not your mark is in use. So if your mark is in use, it will get registered, and if it is not, then the trademark office gives you 3 years to start using the mark in commerce. So you think of a mark, the search report's clear, file it. You have 4 years to start using it. So that's at the end of trademark coverage. Yes.
What is the cost to filing a trademark?
So trademark is divided up into 45 classes. Trademark, the trademark world is divided into 45 classes. So the government fees is $275 per mark per class. And if you have there is a reduced fee as well, it is $225, and that's like $50 discount if you pick up the description of the goods and services from the pre-approved list that the government, that the trademark office has put together. And that is also $225 per mark per class. So class, I can explain it to you. For example, if you're a SaaS-based model, you'll fall into 42, which is called a service, service class. So you would fall into 42. And if you're a downloadable website or a downloadable mobile application, you fall into class 9. So if you're both, then you'll file in class 9 and class 42. So there'll be 2 classes and $275 each.
So what about trademarks in other countries?
Yes, so just like patents, there is no international trademark regime. There is, however, what is called Madrid Protocol filing, which is another trademark treaty that helps you file simultaneously in different jurisdictions. I think presently there are about 143 countries. Pretty much everybody is on that. However, it has its own pros and cons, and it doesn't save you any money. Just like patents, you get priority if you file within, and unlike patents because the timeline is different, but you get priority within if you file, priority as in if you file in the US and within 6 months you file in India and China, you could get the same filing date as that of the US. So you kind of go back in time and get that. But Madrid Protocol is a way to do it, but there is no international trademark. All right, thank you.
So on behalf of Iitmaana, I'd like to thank John and Priya from Silicon Valley Bank, and Anil, Richard, and Shruti for their time from Inventus Law. I think we still have the room for some time and some food. So if you'd like to grab some food and network and talk amongst yourselves, that would be a good wrap up for me. Thank you very much again. Let's give them a round of applause.
Okay, now she's going to email whenever
You don't know that.
next week or something.